Hey, thanks for dropping by to the Planners on Purpose podcast, created by Naomi Tucker, CMP. Now, this space is for the event planners to encourage and empower you so that you can fully live your life on purpose. So before we dig in, please take a moment to subscribe so you get future shows. Now, here she comes, your host, Naomi.
Hello everyone, Naomi here with the Planners on Purpose podcast. I hope you're well and that you are enjoying the signs of spring that are out there. Welcome to those of you that are new to the podcast, and for those that come to every single episode, I am excited to have you here. So I believe that I saw that we were springing forward in our clocks soon. So for those of you that do that in your area, are you excited? I know I am. I'm excited because it means that spring is around the corner, and that means that we can have the sun a bit longer during our work days, and we're just a small step closer to summer, which I really enjoy summer. Things slow down a bit, so we can look forward to that happening. But spring really has got to be my favorite season. I don't know about you, but it's great to see everything wake up, everyone wake up from their winter funk. And that is always nice. So it's great to see the smells and the colors, and it really gets me excited. So I'm really excited to just have that little bit of a step forward and springing forward in our clocks soon. So that would be great. Well, what else has got me excited is this podcast episode, because I've been seeing some of you leaders out there doing the most, and that is great. And many times we're so good at showing off what we've done, what we've got, who we've met, we dress the part. However, not necessarily are we always showing our teams how we model work-life balance and how we balance our work and life and really make that happen. And many times we make it look like magic, that we just got it all together, and maybe you do. And sometimes you're probably just so busy that you never look up and see how you can support your team. So on this podcast, I wanted to talk about how you as a leader can model work-life balance to your team. So if you're ready, let's do this. Excuse my voice a little bit. I think I'm either getting over a cold or coming into a cold, but we're going to just keep on going here. I think when modeling work-life balance to your team, we need to start at communication. Now, when I say work-life balance, we all know that there isn't true work-life balance. We're not where we have an equal amount of time spent at work and then an equal amount of time spent at home. That would be amazing. But it doesn't really look like a pie chart where every single area of the pie chart has equal portions. No, it just means that we have a different look of how balance looks at our lives at all times. So on one hand, we could be dialing it back from home and turning it up at work. And on another hand, we might need work to take a back seat because of so much attention that needs to be in our home. That's what I'm meaning with work-life balance. It's how we balance the pendulum of our lives so that we feel good, that we are paying attention to what matters at any given time. And that is what is important. Are we paying attention to what matters most at any given time in our lives? So let's dive in with our first area that leaders can model work-life balance with their teams, and that is communication. With communication, leaders talk about your own work-life balance with your teams. And it sometimes feels as though you possibly should not be talking about it, or that by talking about it, you seem weak as a leader, but it really will help your team to be able to get an idea on how you are balancing your world so that they can emulate what you're doing, or perhaps get ideas from what you're doing. So for me, if I were going through a tough time, I would acknowledge that I'm going through a tough time. and that I had to compensate to accommodate my work and my life somehow, right? I would model how I was dealing with that busyness. So if there was a uptick in how things were happening at work, I would possibly share how I would have to adjust things at home or maybe work an hour later during this season so that they understand how I am compensating for the additional workload or for that season that I'm in. And then when you're talking to them about, let's say, your own work-life balance, ask them for feedback from your team on how they're doing. And it's just simply sharing. You share how you're doing with the situation, and they share and they model it back. And then you're also modeling at the same time. So this really works well. Another thing with communication, talk to your teams about their time. When you know that they perhaps are taking on extra workload, just ask them, how are they managing to build that into their workday? Or how are they doing with taking on that additional project? Ask them how you can help if you know that, let's say, they're taking on a couple of more things. It's really important to have the lines of communication open so that you can understand where they are with what's on their plate, and you can have a good insight to if you need to provide them with any support if needed. So communication is a big thing. Make sure you're talking with your people. Make sure you're sharing how you're working through some of the changes and the busy seasons that might be happening in your world as well. So the next area that I wanted to talk about is that you keep your boundaries and then you have respect for others' boundaries. Now you might be wondering, well, what is a boundary? I really like how Dr. Henry Cloud talks about boundaries. And he says that boundaries are made up of two essential things. It is what you create and what you allow. So a boundary is really like a property line, and it defines where your property begins and where it ends. And when you put that on top and layer that on top of your work life, it's where does your work end? Where does it begin? Where does that project end? Where does it begin? When people call you, are there hours that they can call you, or are there hours that they cannot call you? There are certain different boundaries that you do have set up in your workday that others respect. And then, of course, you respect others if they have a specific boundary in place. So that's what boundaries are. So you need to ask yourself, what are you going to create and what are you going to allow when it comes to your work? And you want your employees or your team to understand what your boundaries are so that they can practice respecting what those boundaries are for you. And then also in turn, ask them for what their boundaries are. And I mean, you don't have to talk about it in terms of boundaries, but you can at least understand, hey, that person leaves at 4:30 and she leaves at 4:30 because she has to go to the gym. And because you do respect well-being and, that person gets their work done. And so when they leave at 4:30, you respect the fact that they have to leave at 4:30. It's those type of things. So make sure that you're keeping your boundaries. Make sure that you're having respect for other people's boundaries. And in addition to this, it's also making sure that you keep your word on the boundaries that you have so that you can model to someone that you really value your boundary, your time and your energy, right? So, and this is really important because this can also get much bigger to where you have to share with clients what boundaries are, not only for yourself, but then also for your teams. I remember a time that I was leading a large team for a corporate strategic meetings management program. It was a global program, so as you can imagine, this particular program had global presence, and that just meant clients in all parts of the world, emails at all different times of the day, calls at all different times of the day. We were scaling very quickly, and it was really hard to keep up with the demand. And the only way that the team knew how to keep up with everything so quickly was to really just keep handling the emails at whatever time they came in. And the fact is, when they did that, it was killing us. Mistakes were happening, morale was tumbling, and work-life balance was truly in the dumps, right? People were just working at all hours of the day, and we were starting to see that it was taking a toll on the team. So as their leader, it was a sign for me that we needed to turn this around. And after having some conversations with the team, we found that the root cause of this was just the calls and the email exchanges late into the night and early in the morning. It wasn't necessarily due to client demand, but it was due to a lot of the timing of when emails were sent and the place that people were in the world. The thing, though, that happened is that as our team responded at whatever hour of the day or evening it was, then the clients would respond in kind, keeping up with the demand. So the emails and the exchanges, they would keep going. The 3 a.m. instant messages would keep going into the night with many of our team. So what I had to do as a leader was to help them get through this. And I told them we would have to stop emailing the client. Yes, I know. Maybe not stop emailing the client, and it may seem crazy, but really responding to the client at all hours of the night was not helping us. We needed to jointly respond to the client during specific times that we could, in general, be available. Us responding at all hours was just setting up the expectation that this was going to happen all of the time. And if it did, there wouldn't be any team to help this client. So in the end, it absolutely worked out. We ended up resetting expectations with our client. It just took a few weeks of adjusting to the new norm. But in the end, we had a team that was high functioning again. Clients were happy still. We were still managing the new business and things were scaling, but scaling successfully. So with resetting expectations and then also putting some other processes in place in order to help what was happening, things worked out very well. So these are some types of situations that when it comes to setting boundaries, you would have to set boundaries not only for yourself, make sure that your team is setting boundaries, but then also how are your clients respecting those boundaries? Do they know what those boundaries are? And having that open communication to make sure everyone is pretty much aware. So boundaries are super important. To remember, what you create is what you allow, and make sure that your boundaries are crystal clear to your team, to your client, so that everyone is on the same page and in alignment with what is in general to be expected. Of course, things happen, emergency situation happens. There might be a season where, we all need to put the pedal to the metal, but in general, make sure that people are understanding what those boundaries are. Okay, moving on to another area where you as a leader can model work-life balance to your teams. And this is to support and advocate for wellness programs. Now, whenever your company has any kind of wellness program, it's important to support it, to be an advocate for it. And if nobody else is participating in it, maybe you should participate in it, or at least bring up why people aren't participating in it so that it can be a very nice, supportive wellness program for your team. Be their advocate. For example, if you have no meeting Fridays, this is where some companies say, hey, on Fridays, we aren't having any meetings. We have meetings all throughout the week. So let's just have one day where we're not putting meetings on the calendar internally for sure. If we absolutely need to have a client meeting, we'll do that. But let's try to get everybody to support no meeting Fridays. Well, if this is a thing within your organization, support it. Don't put a meeting on someone's calendar on a Friday, especially if it's a meeting that can wait, or especially if it's a meeting that could be done earlier in the week, unless it's an absolute emergency. But that's what I mean by supporting and being an advocate for programs that are there to support well-being, that are there to support balance. Be a supporter. And when it comes to something like no meetings Fridays, making sure that there's communication around that you are supporting it, make sure that you're helping others to follow that same practice, maybe call them out when they're having a meeting on Friday, especially if it's a meeting that really could wait, so that we can foster that environment of supporting some type of a work-life balance, some type of a wellness at our work. And then also, even tell the clients, again, this goes back to communication and it goes back to those boundaries. Tell your clients that this particular wellness program, especially if it's going to impact them, something like a no meeting Friday, that would definitely impact them in some way. Just at least let them know, hey, this is an initiative that our company is doing. This is an initiative that we're doing. So we're not necessarily going to be doing meetings on Fridays, emails, things like that. Absolutely fine. But we're going to try to support everybody in doing that. And you'll be surprised how many people actually will support that. So, and even when it comes to like your vendors and people you work for, depending on what type of planner or event professional that you are, letting the people that you work with know that these programs are happening will be helpful for you so that they can help support it, especially if it's something that would impact them and how they communicate and interact with you. And then finally, the last one I have is stand up for your team. Yes, stand up for your team. As a leader, you can model work-life balance if you're standing up for your team. Now, many times as a leader, you'll have a team member that's struggling, and they can be struggling because they're having some work-life balance challenges. Perhaps they're having trouble trying to really manage what they have going on. Many times I've seen it in different colleagues or team members. They're just having a struggle with time management. They have a lot on their plate. They're having trouble trying to fit all the different intricacies of all the events that they're planning into their 8 to 10 hour workday. And many times they need some support on how to do that. So stand up for your team, support them. If they're struggling, try to identify where they're struggling in and try to help them with what that is. If they are needing some extra time during the week to care for their son and daughter, perhaps there's something going on, have understanding, give them that bandwidth, and maybe help reprioritize some things that they're going through or some things at their work. Maybe have another team member help with it. Whatever you need to do in order to give them support. Maybe a member of your team has issues that arose. Maybe there's a loved one that has an illness, right? Maybe there's a death in the family. Make sure to support them so that they can and help them to create a plan and actually get either certain work completed, shifting the work if we needed to shift the work to someone else, but definitely support them. And when you support them with that empathy, have compassion for their situation. It really helps them feel as though they're taken care of and as though they're seen. So as a leader, you can definitely do that by standing up for your team, okay? When team members are going through things like death in the family, there'll be some team members that are in the hospital room trying to keep up on their work while their loved one is sick. Those type of situations, if any way that you can help take that burden off of them by handling some of that work, definitely try to do your best in doing that. It definitely will help, and it will bring your respect level that they have for you up a notch because you definitely leaned into their situation to help support them as much as you could. Okay, well, there you have it. Now, modeling is important because your team needs to see how doing this work-life balance thing actually can work, right? And especially in an environment like event management where we have to deal with so many pressures. When your team looks to you, they want to know, is this normal? How do I manage through all of this? And what else can I do to help my situation? They can be thinking these things and looking at you for some of those answers. As a leader, I know that many times we don't always have the answer. However, we do have the opportunity to help give them transparency, to help motivate them and help inspire them to action. So those are the things that we can do as leaders. Now, if you struggle with helping your team understand how they can manage through these situations, perhaps you may benefit through attending the Banish Burnout Challenge. This challenge is happening soon and you can check it out and really see how some of the tips that can help you with preventing burnout for yourself and for your team. You can even craft your personal burnout prevention strategy or come to the challenge with your team in mind and create a team strategy, right, to help prevent burnout and to alleviate stresses. And so if you're interested, go to plannersonpurpose.com/banish burnout and sign up. I would love to see you there. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode on how to model work-life balance as a leader in the event industry. There's so many leaders in this industry, and you are all doing amazing at leading your teams, especially in times such as this. However, know that your team is always looking at you, and they want you to support them and to guide them. And hopefully some of the tips that are mentioned in this podcast will help you to do just that, help you to model work-life balance to your event teams. Well, that's all I have for you. Until next time, my friends, please stay on purpose.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, hit the like button and tell us how much you enjoyed the show by leaving a message in the comments. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.